Hello, everyone. Let's start. Thank you all for joining today's webinar. My name is Nikhil, and I'll be the host for today's meeting. So we plan on having webinars like this every single Saturday. So be sure to check your emails and the WhatsApp group regularly for more information. I'd appreciate it if you could share the link of our website with your own experience with your friends and family. With that being said, let's get started. Today, as you know, Karthik will be speaking about his job as a management consultant. He will talk about his work environment, educational experience, and more. I'll give the opportunity to everyone to ask questions in between. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can click the raise hand button and I'll unmute you. Or you can send the message in the chat. So now, Karthik, can you give us a short introduction of yourself first, and then I'll ask a few questions?
Yeah, sure thing. Before we get started, Nikhil, thank you so much for having me as a guest. I really appreciate it. I think what you're doing with Career Talk 360 is amazing, because I know that being in high school or even like the first few years of college, it's very unnerving to decide what you want to be when you grow up, right? So I think it's wonderful that you're having this as a platform that folks can come to explore other careers and get kind of like an insider's view on how others pursued their career path. With that said, hi everyone, my name is Karthik Kalapatapu. Right now I am a management consultant for a company called Alex Partners. You might not have heard their name before, but what they do is they're kind of like Accenture, Deloitte, McKinsey, BCG, and Bain. So they provide like consulting services for companies, right? In terms of what a company can do from a strategic standpoint to improve their operations to become more profitable, right? But my path to becoming a management consultant was not a conventional path. So let me start in the beginning, right? So I am from the Irving and Coppell area. I graduated Coppell High School in 2009. After that, I went to UT Austin to get my bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. I graduated in 2013. After that, since I had pursued an engineering degree, right? There were more curves and paths along the way, right? The reason I chose chemical engineering degree is because I wasn't sure if I wanted to be pre-med or not, or if I wanted to do engineering. And chemical engineering just seemed to be the widest net because I had to take the biology classes, the chemistry classes, the organic chemistry classes, and everything that's a prerequisite to get into med school, right? So it's kind of like hey, I'll pursue this degree and then make a game time decision like my junior year of college on if I want to pursue medicine or not. So that's the reason why I chose chemical engineering. And then after chemical engineering, I graduated. I worked at ExxonMobil. I worked for about 5 years, kind of like in an industrial setting, understanding how like plastics and rubbers and things like that are made. So I know quite a lot about like plastics that goes into like if you get milk gallon jugs, right? Or if you get like tires for your cars. The plant I worked at, if you had 6 tires, right? And you picked one tire, the rubber for that one tire would have been made at the plant I worked at. So I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty neat. It helps you get like a very good understanding of how things are made around you. And that's really what intrigued me, right? And then after being at Exxon for 5 years, I realized I wanted to learn more about the business side of things and be on the more commercial side of things. And so I just decided to get my MBA, and I went to UT Austin again to get my MBA. And then coming out of my MBA school is when I decided to go into management consulting so I could get that focus on the business side and the commercial side of things away from operations, right? So with that said, I know that's kind of like a brief summary of what has happened over 10 years, but I'm more than happy to take questions and things like that on kind of like from high school to college, like how like decisions were made or like talk about different majors. Because I guess what I tried to do in high school and in college was I wanted to be like very well-rounded, and I tried to ensure that the education that I got kind of fit that.
So thank you for that. So my first question is about your job as a management consultant. So what do you do on a daily basis at your job?
Yeah. So what a management consultant does is they provide kind of, so think of it, you have a company, right? And the company needs to be profitable, right? And the company has investors, and the company expects that company, the investors expect that company to increase profitability, increase the revenue over time, right? And so the question is, how do you go about doing that, right? You could do that by helping a company reach more people to get more revenue. And you can also help that company by getting rid of costs, right? And so essentially what we do is we take a look at a company's like income statements. We try to understand every single line, right? So how does the company make its money? What can the company do from like a customer standpoint to retain customers, right? What can a company do to like from a rebates, from an incentive standpoint to get more customers on board? How are the salespeople being managed? What can we do to get more customers in? That's what we look on the revenue side, right? And then on the cost side, we look at like hey, what is this company doing in terms of research and development? What is this company doing in terms of like IT projects? What is this company doing with its like legal team? What is this company doing in terms of the way it manufactures things, the way it produces things, the way it supplies things? So we take a look at all of that and essentially help a company either increase its revenue or decrease its costs to help its profitability stay up.
Okay, so you help the company with many different problems they might have. So generally, to be a management consultant, what education or degrees do you need?
Yeah, so there's two paths into management consulting, right? One is you could get a bachelor's degree in business. And I typically say business, right? Because to be an effective management consultant, you need to understand an income statement and balance sheet, and a business degree typically helps you with that. But that's not to say other majors are excluded. I've seen folks from with an economics degree become management consultants. I've seen folks with a psychology degree become management consultants. So there's no really like set path to it, like out of undergrad, right? And that's just because being a management consultant, you need to be a very good generalist, and they try to seek those people, right? Yeah. So so essentially you need a bachelor's degree in, I'd say typically like 75 to 80% of the folks you work with will have a finance, accounting, economics degree or something on that matter. So that's one way with a bachelor. That's one way with a bachelor's degree. The other way is you could get an engineering degree. You could get like any other degree that you felt like, right? And you could also choose to get a graduate degree, and the graduate degree could be an MBA if you wanted to. And then you could go to management consulting, and that's the path that I chose. The other options would be, for example, if you want to get an MD degree to be a doctor, but you realize that you don't like working in a hospital setting, but you want to work with hospitals and help hospitals improve profitability, improve operations, improve patient care and all that. So you can get an MD degree and still be a management consultant. You can get a JD degree, which is a law degree, and you can also be a management consultant, right? So it's not super restrictive.
So many different people from different backgrounds are management consultants. So what drew you to become a management consultant from your chemical engineering background?
Yeah, so the reason I liked it, one is you get a lot of exposure to other companies, right? Because typically as a management consultant, your projects are roughly between 6 months to a year long at the most, right? So you travel around between companies, and you get to see a lot of like the good things in a company and the bad things in a company. The other thing that drew me to consulting is that the folks that you work with are people who report directly to a CEO. So it helps you build executive presence. And that's something that I saw for myself from a long-term standpoint, right? Like I want to be around like-minded people so that I can be successful once I get to that stage, right? And the third thing was, honestly, as a management consultant, you travel a lot, so you wake up Monday morning, you get on a plane, you go to your client site, and then you work there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you come back on Thursday. And then when you're there, like you can expense meals, you're in a hotel. It's quite nice, right? And so the fact that we're in like a coronavirus situation, it's sad that like that's not there anymore, because honestly, the perks of it was also something that drew me to consulting.
Okay, so you had many different factors that you liked about consulting. So before this job, you mentioned you had previous jobs. Can you elaborate about which jobs you had before being a management consultant?
Yeah, sure thing. So so I only worked for one company before becoming a management consultant, and that company was ExxonMobil, right? And and I was at ExxonMobil for 5 years. And the way corporate jobs typically work is you're in a role for about a year and a half to 2 years, right? So with that said, since I was at Exxon for about 5 years, I moved around and I was across 3 different roles in my time there, right? So when I started there, I was a chemical engineer, so I took a look at like temperatures, pressures of industrial equipment, making sure that we were making things with the right specs, right? So for example, right, think of it this way. Imagine having like a milk carton or a milk jug, right? If that plastic, so we made plastic pellets, right? So if that plastic pellet isn't made right, for example, if you just leave your milk carton like outside, that plastic will melt along with the condensation. You know, like that's not something that you want to happen, right? Another thing, for example, is I worked as a rubber manufacturer too. So we made rubber. We gave it to companies like Goodyear and Michelin, and so that they could make tires out of it, right? We would also give it to companies that make like gaskets, right? For example, if you have an AC system at home, you need to keep the cold air restricted, right? So they made like gaskets so like you can seal things well and whatnot. So we gave it to different companies. So obviously if the rubber properties were not adequate, you would have bad things happen, in the sense that imagine you're driving like an 18-wheeler, and if that rubber is not able to withhold the pressure of the truck, you would have a blowout, and that's not something that you want to happen, right? Or if you're trying to have a sealant for your AC, right? You're gonna have to run your AC like 24/7 instead of like maybe like 12 times a day to keep your house at the same temperature, right? So I did a lot of process type work, and it's quite on the technical side, and you're in an industrial setting.
So how did you know that you did you want to continue chemical engineering, or were you sure that you wanted to switch over to management consultant? How did you know? How did you make the change?
Yeah. So what drew me to chemical engineering was that I wanted to have an understanding of like the nuts and bolts of production and how the world works. And so honestly, like the reason I chose to work at Exxon is like from a curiosity standpoint, right? Like I know how things are made, right? But then once you're in that environment for about 3 years, all you're learning, like you've learned about 80 to 90% of things, right? There's obviously things that you can continue to learn and grow. But once like I got that 80%, I knew that I had gotten the most out of that job from a development standpoint, right? So for my own development, I was like, okay, like I've had enough of this job. I'm still curious. And what am I curious about? I know operations, but I don't know enough about the business side of things. And so once that realization hit, that's when I started applying to MBA schools and decided to switch to become a management consultant.
So you mentioned that you chose to major in chemical engineering because you weren't sure if you wanted to pursue medical or engineering, and so it was like a mix of both of them, you said.
Mm-hmm.
So what age were you when you decided all of that you wanted to pursue major in chemical engineering? Did you know from the start, or did you decide in like 11th, 12th grade?
Yeah, so in high school, I did not know what I wanted to major in, and honestly, I will share like I mean this is like something I'm like embarrassed about, but it is what it is, so I'll share it. So I took AP chemistry in high school. Like when I took the AP exam, I got a 1 on the AP exam, right? But lo and behold, like I am a chemical engineer, right? I got my act together to like study and like become good at chemical engineering, right? So being in high school, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. And I think it's fair that like folks in high school, like you don't really need to have a good idea, right? You do need to have a good idea towards the end of your freshman year in college, right? And that's when I started to have like a good idea of what I wanted to do. Like I said, the reason I chose chemical engineering was because one, I wanted to leave my options for being pre-med open. So I had to take the organic chemistry classes, physics classes, etc. Right? And then the other thing as to why I wanted to be a chemical engineering was the companies back at that time, right? So think of this back in 2010, right? Not sure how old you folks were back in 2010, but in 2010, the largest company in the world was ExxonMobil, you know? And that's because like we thought we were going to run out of oil. Oil was this like huge like commodity, you know, and it's like does America have enough oil? Are we going to depend on Saudi Arabia for oil? Just based off of like things that were going on back then, oil was valued a lot, and Exxon was the largest company in the world. After Exxon was PetroChina, right? And then after that was Apple, right? And then after Apple was Microsoft, right? And so back then the world was in a very industrial mindset. And I guess that had a bearing on what I chose to do too. And also back then, internships were a lot for if you wanted to be a chemical engineer, right? But before I finish that, now you fast forward to 2020, right? The largest and most valuable company in the world is Apple, you know? Apple now is 5 times as large as ExxonMobil was back in 2010. After Apple is Microsoft. Microsoft is 4.5 times as large as ExxonMobil was back then. After Microsoft is Amazon. After Amazon is Google. After Google is Facebook. And for the record, Facebook is now twice as large as Exxon was back then, right? And I guess one thing that I want to share with you guys is that, I mean, try to think 10 years ahead as to like where you see the world when you decide on a career or a major, right? Because back then, if you thought about like electrical engineering and computer science, it was pretty boring, right? Because like back then, Apple just came out with its iPhone 3, right? And it wasn't like it was a cool product, right? But people thought it was a fad, right? Because people really liked their Motorola Razors, right? Microsoft was a very boring company back then, right? Because people only used Microsoft for like their Office products, and then they also used Microsoft to kind of like IM people at work. Amazon was good, but Amazon didn't have Amazon Prime back then. It didn't have Amazon Music. It didn't have all these other offerings. Google was always good, but back then was when like Chrome was just starting to be built out, you know, and Google Maps was still finicky back then, right? And Facebook, in high school, the majority of my friends got Facebook in 2008, 2009. So we thought it was like MySpace, you know, it's like, okay, it's going to be there for like 2 more years and then it's going to go away. So there really wasn't that much promise or anything in electrical engineering, which is why I chose chemical engineering. But if I could go back and if I could give one piece of advice to you guys, it's kind of like, try to picture a world like 10 years down the road and see what you think the largest companies would be. And that's what you should try to get a major in.
So you mentioned how the world has changed a lot in these 10 years. So when you were choosing your major, was it very overwhelming, or were you pretty much set on chemical engineering when you were choosing in the last year?
Yeah. So I'll say, I mean, like I had certain criteria, right? Like my criteria was I wanted a degree that gave me flexibility in like what I wanted to do. So for example, if I was hardcore and only wanted to do like oil related stuff, right? I could have chosen petroleum engineering, but I chose not to do petroleum engineering because, like, for example, what if oil prices go down? You'll be out of a job, right? So chemical engineering is very similar to petroleum engineering, right? So it's like, okay, I can reach out on a limb and do petroleum engineering stuff, right? And then I also wanted to do pre-med, and petroleum engineering, you don't have to take certain chemistry classes. You don't have to take your pre-med requirements, right? Like your biochemistries and whatnot. But as a chemical engineer, you had to. So, I mean, chemical engineering was the right balance for me at that time. And then in addition to that, I took a look at how many internships were available and for what folks. And chemical engineering seemed to be like the broadest and the highest paying internships at that time. And so it's kind of like a confluence of all three things, right? Is it broad enough? Is it going to help me? Is it going to give me an option to be a doctor if I wanted to? And then from an internship and a career standpoint, does it pay well?
So you chose it because there's many options along the line. So I have some more questions for you, but first I'm gonna let any other participants ask their questions if they have any. So if anyone else has any questions before I ask more questions, you guys can type it in the chat or you can click the raise hand button. And thank you for sharing the insight of your job and everything. So if anyone has any questions, they can send it in the chat. So in the meantime, while people are sending questions in the chat, I'll ask another question. So you wanted to pursue this career because of all the opportunities it gave you. So about your job as a management consultant, what is your favorite part of your job as a whole right now? What inspires you?
Yeah, my favorite part of the job would be the people aspect of it, right? You're able to work in kind of like a workshop setting, kind of like small groups, you know, like 6 people, you know, with CFOs and like CIOs and CTOs of a company, right? Granted, these companies aren't as large as like Google, Microsoft, or Facebook, right? These would be more like, think of companies that are in the mid tier. So think of like, imagine going to like Goodyear, right? And working at the headquarters of Goodyear, right? Or imagine working at another company for like, you know, the people who like mow lawns and like cut trees like for houses in the suburbs. So like there's a company that kind of like that owns these operations, right? So imagine working for a company like that, you know. So it's the people relationships and being able to think strategically, right? And that's what inspires me to do my job well.
So you love this job because of the people aspect and the opportunities. So you mentioned before how your job used to allow you to travel before COVID-19. So that situation before, how was the traveling like? So were you traveling on a daily basis, or how was the traveling?
Yeah. So I really enjoyed the travel. Traveling is another big reason like why I chose to be a management consultant, right? Like off the record, right? So I mean, when you travel, right, you rack up like airline points, you rack up hotel points, you rack up car rental points, and all of these, you know, if you decide to take vacation, right, you can use all these points to travel wherever you want to for free, right? I think that's a pretty sweet deal as a management consultant. And then obviously, like you get to expense your meals too, right? And so like you could have like a $50 dinner every single night, and the company would pay for it, right? Granted, yes, you have to show your receipts and all of that, right? Because it's the company's paying for it, but it's still like something that's allowable and that's doable, right? So I really enjoyed my time like traveling as a consultant. And honestly, I was traveling Monday. So I usually left Sunday nights because I'm not much of a morning person. Like I don't want to wake up at Monday at 4 a.m. to get ready for a 6 a.m. flight. So I left Sunday nights. I came back Thursday evenings. And I traveled, I mean, I'd say I traveled for like 95% of my time. So like in the past 2 years, I've traveled like in the past 2 years, which is 104 weeks, I probably like, excluding coronavirus times, right? I probably traveled for like 90 of those weeks.
So you traveled a lot. Can you mention some of the places that you traveled to pretty often?
Yeah. So I'll mention kind of like I'll mention these places in two different ways. One will be client related work, right? So which is where like our projects are and all that. The other one will be kind of like as a consultant, right? These companies also care about developing your career, and these companies also care about like having folks meet each other, right? Because you're working as part of a team, and you have to know the bigger company, the company as a whole. So from a client's standpoint, right? So my very first project happened to be in beautiful Las Colinas, right? I mean, I say that a bit sarcastically, but I mean, it was nice because back then I was living in Houston, and so my project it was in Las Colinas, which meant that I pretty much came home, or I had the ability to come home every single week if I felt like it, right? So that was nice. My second project was in Kentucky, and that Kentucky it was Lexington, Kentucky. So Lexington, Kentucky, but to get to Lexington, I mean, you know, you can fly directly to Lexington, you can go to Cincinnati, you can go to Louisville, you can spend a weekend here or there. I had the opportunity to like hang out with friends in those places. My third project was actually a project in Canada, in Montreal, but technically Canada is an international, location. And so because of that, we actually had to work in the Dallas office, right? So I was a little bummed out for that, but it was still cool working with a Canadian company. My fourth project was in Philadelphia. And I guess that was my last project before like the coronavirus situation hit. So I was in Philadelphia for 10 months. And then my fifth project, like I've just been working from home because of the coronavirus situation. So that's where my clients were. From a, I guess, I wouldn't want to say recreational travel, but from a travel, company related travel standpoint, every year we have all firm meetings where everyone gets together and like you get to see like the CEO of our company, like leadership, all of them talk. So 2 years ago we had one in Chicago, and so it's literally kind of, think of it as like an all expense paid like 4-day like seminar, workshop, and like expo essentially with the company. So that was in Chicago. Last year was in Las Vegas. This year was going to be in Denver, but it had to be canceled, right? In addition to that, we within consulting, right? There's you can consult, for example, you can consult for energy companies, you can consult for retail companies, you can consult for hospitals, you can consult for aerospace companies, you can consult for companies for technology, media, telecommunications companies. So think of companies like Verizon, AT&T, like payments companies like Square, whatnot, you know? So each group has their own breakout session, right? And so from these breakout sessions, right, I was able to go to Denver, Colorado for one. I was able to go to New Orleans, Louisiana for one. I was able to go to San Diego for one. Where else was? Yeah, San Diego. And then, and then the other one was in Chicago. So I was able to travel to these locations. So it was fun. You got a lot of exposure. You got a lot of travel. I would highly recommend a career in consulting, especially if you have an avid interest in traveling and all of that, and the curiosity like to do good work too, right? Like that's something that'll keep you in the job. That's very important. And I think it's very good to do it, especially in your early 20s.
So thanks for sharing about all the places you've traveled. So traveling was a huge part of your job. So how has COVID-19 affected your traveling? How do you work now without traveling?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, because you don't have any travel, you are working from home, right? I will say that in the past, because people would get on a plane Monday mornings, and because people would get on a plane Thursday evenings, people wouldn't bother you because this was kind of like your alone time, your me time. You know, I was able to read a book on my Kindle. I was able to do whatever I wanted to, like on the plane. But now, like nobody has that. Everyone's working from home, so the expectation is that you're available by phone, by IM, by email, all the time, right? So it's a little bit taxing. It feels like, okay, like I want to get out of my house. I want to do like more like fun things, right? So I will say it's been a bit of an adjustment, especially like working from home.
So someone asked a question, what kind of courses best prepare you for engineering in high school?
In high school, okay. In high school, I would say if you're able to take Physics B and Physics C in high school, they would prepare you for engineering. The reason I say Physics B and Physics C, and honestly, I would say Physics C if possible, because Physics C is the one that gives you college credit if you get a 4 or a 5 on the AP exam. Because no matter what engineering profession you choose, you will have to do physics, you know? So for example, if you want to be an electrical engineer, you don't have to do chemistry at all, you know? But if you want to be an electrical engineer, if you want to be a mechanical engineer, if you want to be a petroleum engineer, if you want to be a chemical engineer, if you want to be a biomedical engineer, all five of these majors require you to take physics, you know, and it's Physics C that they want you to take. But of these, if you want it to be like, but not all of them require you to take chemistry. That's why. So I would say Physics C, and then Calculus BC. If you can get done with it in high school, I think that would be very helpful too.
So thank you for sharing what all we can do in high school. That would be a big help. So I have a question. So you said how we should predict 10 years in the future when choosing a major. So do you think in the future, since COVID-19 has affected your job right now, do you think in the future it would be less traveling now that people have gotten to experience the job without traveling?
Yeah. I would say no. I would say travel might actually, like, I think they would find a good balance, because I will say that I had to travel, I had to travel like 90% of my time, right? I think that 90% will actually probably go down to like 70 or 75%. We will not get rid of travel whatsoever. And that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that consulting is a very people business. And so you need to be able to work with people. You need to be able, like, you need to sell work. You need to be able to, like the CEO and the CFO of a company needs to be able to like you enough to want to work with you, right? And that's doable only if you interface in person, right? It's a lot harder to do that via phone or via like face to like Zoom meetings, you know? So the people aspect of it is what will make the travel, it'll still keep the travel and all that alive. I personally, I know that all consulting firms, like they're not going to allow people to travel at least until July 2021. But after that, like, I'm sure that traveling will resume, and traveling will not be like 90% travel. It'll probably be like 70% travel, and you'll have more freedom. I think that gives for better work-life balances.
Thank you. So you mentioned all of that, how you think it'll change a little bit. So also someone asked about extracurriculars. What extracurriculars should they take in high school to help prepare them also for engineering?
Okay. So for engineering, so honestly speaking, to get into like a good engineering school, grades are what matter the most, right? So they want to see like solid math and science grades, right? And if having solid math and science grades were hard, I would say at least, I mean, if they were okay your freshman year, try to make them a bit better your sophomore year, make them even better your junior year, make them the best your senior year, right? So take them make sure that you're showing like improvement, because grades are what matter, right? The other way to express interest, I will get to the extracurricular part, but since I'm on the grades aspect of it, so yeah, I'd say taking physics is very important, taking calculus is important, and then like taking a statistics class is also very important. Okay, from an extracurricular standpoint, I would say if at least, so I went to Coppell High School. I'll be able to speak to Coppell High School a bit easier. I mean, being into like a solar car team and all of that would be very helpful, right? But I know that it's kind of the options that are available for kids is quite limited, right? In Coppell High School. But I would say your extracurriculars would probably have to be more on like be on the solar car team, if one still exists, and then also being on a few business extracurriculars helps as well, because not all engineers end up being engineers, right? Like a good portion of them, I would say a good like 60% of them do engineering for a couple years like myself and then get out of it, right? So having a good business background also helps, right? So with that said, so your extracurriculars, I mean, if you can do BPA, which is Business Professionals of America, or FBLA, which is Future Business Leaders of America, that would be helpful too, because in doing these competitions, you know, like you're either speaking for a product, you're pitching for a product, and these are skills that like if you have like these are skills that business folks who have an engineering background would be able to speak to.
So someone asked, do internships/summer projects help with your college application, and what internships should they go for?
Yeah. And again, is this for engineering or is this for consulting or just in general?
It didn't specify, so I would assume in general.
In general, okay. Yeah, so I'd say internships and internships will definitely help, right? I mean, internships, what they do is they kind of let the college admissions board know that you're serious about this, right? And that you know what you're talking about, it like in your essays, and you know what the expectations are, right? So it just makes your case on whether it's majoring in business or whether it's majoring in engineering, it just makes that case a lot more believable, right? And the admissions board is more confident in letting that person in for that major, right? It's one of the most direct ways to be like, hey, I'm interested in this, so please put me in this major, right? As far as internships, like things that I've seen, like talking to my friends and other folks, like what they've done, if you are interested in the business side of things, I would say if you can work at like kind of like in an office setting, helping with like financial records, or like if you like a person who does taxes, right? If you work in an office like that, or if you intern for like H&R Block or something like that, that's a small step towards expressing interest in business. Another way you can have like internship experience on the business side of things would be so I guess think of this as a new age like type thing, right? So part of marketing is a part of business, right? And one way that you can market things is through like Instagram, Facebook, etc., right? So if you found like a small business and you help them with like marketing operations through Instagram or through ads or like or Google searches or something like that, if you have tangible results that you can put on your application, I think that would go a long way, right? Because this is how like a lot of companies are making their money off of platforms like Instagram ads, Google ads, and Facebook ads, right? So those are a couple things for business. If you want to go into the science side of things, if you can get a lab internship or something like that at UT Dallas or UT Southwestern, you know, that would hint to the admissions committee that you're really interested in a career in science. And I would highly urge folks to like reach into their contacts and see if they can get an internship, right? It doesn't have to be paid, right? But just being around these folks helps you get an idea of what they do on a daily basis, right? So far I've talked about business, I've talked about science. Now if we talk about engineering, again, on the engineering side, I would say, again, grades are like most of like what matters the most. But going forward, looking into the future, a lot of engineering will be focused on AI and machine learning. So if you're able to apply any computer science skills towards like anything, right? Like or automate something, right? Or yeah, or if you're able to automate something like for an office, right? I think that would help you get into a good engineering school. And keep in mind that it's hard to do things on like the chemical engineering side because like you don't have access to industrial equipment. It's hard to do things on the biomedical side because like your best bet would be to go intern at a lab because you don't have like the science equipment that's needed, right? So I would say computers, programming, that would be like your best bet and your easiest access to getting exposure.
Thank you for that advice. So someone else asked was how was life in college at UT Austin, and would you recommend UT Austin?
Yeah, college in UT Austin was fantastic. I would highly recommend it for a couple of reasons, right? Reason number one is it's a very big state school, right? The other thing too about UT Austin is it's a public Ivy. If you haven't heard of the term public Ivy, I would highly recommend you go Google it. There's about 8 public Ivies in the United States. And obviously the Ivy League schools are like the Harvard, the Yale, the Princeton, the Columbias, all of that. The public Ivies are essentially large state schools, which have a very good like funding and very good, like they're just well-rounded, right? So one is, so stepping back, yeah, UT Austin's great because one, it's a public Ivy. Two is because it's a large state school and it's kind of like the flagship of the UT system. It's very well-rounded, right? So whether you want to go for engineering, great, or business or sciences, great school all around, right? If you want to go to if you want to go there to become a teacher, still a great school. If you want to go there to become a nurse, great school. Like if you're trying to, and also if you want to stay in the state of Texas, it's the best school I would say you could go to for a bang for the buck perspective if you want to stay in Texas, right? And I think the other thing too is from a tuition standpoint, like UT's tuition is very reasonable compared to like for the education you get, it's very good. And then from a social standpoint, I think UT is also very good because it allows you to grow as a person while being away from parents. I think that's very important in terms of becoming independent, being able to think for yourself, being able to like fend for yourself, being able to learn how the world works for yourself, right? So I would think that it's if you have a shot at going to UT compared to any other school, it's amazing. The other thing too is UT is located like kind of in the heart of Austin, right? So I will say that A&M is a great school as well, but things are like very far apart. You need a car there. There's not good like public transport. But going to UT Austin, like very good public transport. You're in the heart of the city. Very good food. People are very nice. They're very social. They're very friendly. So it's kind of like an all-in-one package on that front.
Thank you for that. So if you could go back in time and fix a mistake, is there anything you would have done differently, whether it be in high school or college? Is there anything you would have changed?
Yeah. So again, this is being able to think 10 years ahead, right? So I wish honestly, I wish I chose a degree in electrical engineering, right? And I'll tell you a couple of reasons why, right? So one, I mean, our world now like highly depends on electrical, like not electrical engineering, but career paths that are on that front. And I will honestly say that I do have a couple of friends who did take jobs with Microsoft and Amazon, and they took these jobs back in 2013. Okay, to put things in perspective, okay, yeah. So they took these jobs in 2013, right? And obviously, when you go work for a corporate job, you have like a salary aspect to things, and then you have like a bonus or like equity or stock option aspect to these things, right? So honestly, like a few of my friends, they were able to like. They got Amazon stock, you know, back when it was at like $250, right? For the record, now Amazon is at $3,250, right? And so obviously these are kids that are my age and they're equity millionaires, you know, just because they majored in the right thing and they were able to think like that far ahead, right? So, I mean, if there was one thing I could change, it would honestly be like, I wish I had chosen my major better, because going forward, like the industrial side of things isn't going to be that valued in America.
So thank you for that. Someone else asked a question. So what skills are most needed to become an engineer? For example, a biomedical engineer, and what are the best ways to obtain them?
Yeah, and so for biomedical engineering, so to become a biomedical engineer, So biomedical engineering is, I would say it's a hybrid between three things, right? Biomedical engineering is a hybrid between mechanical engineering, between chemical engineering, and between electrical engineering. So if you do become a biomedical engineer, you will get a little bit, like your curriculum and the classes you take are going to be a little bit of all those three combined, right? And I will say, while that does sound nice, think of it this way, right? If you choose to purely become a chemical engineer, you get a lot of depth in chemical engineering. You get a lot of depth in mechanical engineering if you want to be a mechanical engineer. If you want to be an electrical engineer, you get a lot of depth for electrical engineering, right? But being a biomedical engineer, it's kind of like a jack of all trades. So you're able to understand all of those things, but there's no depth to it, right? So it comes with its trade-offs. And so the question again was the skills needed to become a good biomedical engineer. Okay. So the skills honestly would become, you need to know a little bit of programming because you need to be able to some of your curriculum will depend on let's program kind of imagine programming an artificial heart, right? That's something biomedical engineers would do. So being able to understand programming, that's one, right? The other thing too is, I guess, if you're able to get some sort of patient care from an internship standpoint, or working in a lab for dissections and all of that sort, that would be another skill set that would help you either apply to the biomedical engineering major and help you succeed in it, right? So again, as a recap, it would be the programming skills, because you have to program things like artificial hearts, artificial pumps, things like that. And then as a biomedical engineer, you're designing things for patients, right? So understanding how things are done in a lab environment, or understanding how dissections, understanding how people are operated on, that would be very helpful too.
Okay. So I have a question. You said that in high school, when choosing your major, you should be able to predict what's going to change in the next 10 years. So do you have any idea what you think would change in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think in the next 10 years, there's going to be a lot of focus, again, on artificial intelligence and machine learning. They're trying to automate a lot of things, right? I'm sure, if you take a look at the state of the economy right now, right? Since the economy has shut down since March, a lot of people have been out of jobs. And of those jobs that have been lost, about 40% of those jobs appear to be permanent job losses, right? But even though they're permanent, somebody still has to get the work done, right? So the way companies are going around doing these things is that they're getting software packages, and they're getting other things they're getting, we call this RPA, robotic process automation. So they're getting other things to do this work instead of hiring people, right? So think of it this way. Would you rather pay $2,000 a month to the software that can do things? Or do you want to pay $2,000 per month for 6 people who can do the same thing? So you'd rather go with the software that does it. So AI, machine learning, that's going to be one. I think the other thing too that will pick up is entrepreneurship, right? You have platforms like Instagram, you have platforms like TikTok now, depending on the fate of what happens after September 15th. And you have a lot of these influencers, right? And honestly, these influencers, they don't really do much other than coach people, and they get paid for their coaching. So entrepreneurship on these platforms is what we'll pick up. That's something that I see too, right? So I've seen people that have been kind of selling their fitness programs on Instagram, or their weight loss programs on Instagram, or their mindset programs or leadership programs, right? For example, if you want to be successful, what's the mindset you need to have? What's the psychology you need to have? So think of it how football players have coaches and basketball players have coaches. So think of this, if you want to become an executive or an entrepreneur, you have coaches, right? So coaching, kind of this freelance job. Another thing that I see going on in the future is kind of helping companies improve their marketing, improve their targeting people, right? So for example, if you come to me, don't sell me baby products like diapers and baby bottles, because I don't have any kids, right? But being able to identify new parents, right? You want to target them so that you can send their ads and coupons and things like that their way, right? So being able to kind of grow in platforms, or have a YouTube channel, for example, right? Because a lot of people are taking they're pulling the plug, they're pulling the cord on TV, right? People are monetizing YouTube channels by having ads on YouTube channels. So I see those things becoming like big in the future.
So this next question is a little different. So aside from your job, do you have any hobbies that you partake in?
Yeah. So I will say I had more free time before being in consulting, because in consulting my average work week is closer to 50 to 55 hours a week, whereas when I was at ExxonMobil, I was working 40 hours a week, right? 40 to like 45. So I had like about 10 hours of extra time. So I mean, apart from kind of like working out to stay healthy, right? A couple things that I do enjoy doing are I enjoy cooking. Yes, I enjoy cooking. So recently, like during the coronavirus times, we got an air fryer. So I'm learning how to cook and experiment things like using the air fryer. I think it's a very neat and cool device. Makes like preparation of like paneer and like various things a lot easier. You know, like you just cut up the paneer, soak it in, like if you want soy sauce and like vinegar for like a Indo-Chinese taste, or if you want to put like other like masalas on it and you cook it, like it makes things easier, and it's made me become an avid like person who wants to cook, right? So yeah, so working out, cooking. I also enjoy like exploring nature. I'm going on hikes. Like I've gone to like Dino Valley State Park, which is like south of Fort Worth. I've also gone to there's this like sunflower farm kind of like north of Allen. So kind of just like hiking, walking around there, and so on. I will say that before I became a consultant, I was in this organization called Man Mukti. It's kind of a mental health service organization targeted towards South Asians, because there's stigma associated with like depression, anxiety, and things like that. So I would say we had a founder, but I mean, we had like 10 other folks who supported the founder in its initial launch. So I was one of those like 10 other people who was there in the beginning. So we did a lot of like outreach, and mental health is one of the issues that I care like deeply about. And I think that's something that will play a focus more in people's lives going forward too.
So do you think it's important to balance your life between work and hobbies and family?
I think that's very important. Like having a career, having a job is a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. You're not gonna get through it in like 5 years and be like, ta-da, I'm done, right? It's a marathon. It's gonna last 30 to 35 years. And with people like living longer, going forward, I would honestly expect people's careers to be actually 50 years long, on average, right? Yeah. So with that said, right, you need to have a good balance of working. You need to have a good balance of family. You need to enjoy what you're doing. You need to be able to like take a break and focus on yourself, focus on family, focus on your hobbies, to have a very fulfilling and a very happy career.
Thank you so much. Your experience has really helped all of us, especially since you shared insight deeply and how we can change and do things. So I don't have any more questions. Actually, someone else just asked a question. So someone asked, what are the pros and cons of becoming an engineer?
Pros and cons of becoming an engineer. Yeah. So I would say a pro of becoming an engineer, finding employment out of college is very easy. Like everyone wants engineers, right? So that's a pro. Another pro is like their salaries their salaries and all of that are they're very good coming out of college. I will share a link with you guys just to see kind of like typically what UT engineers would make. I just shared it as a link if you guys would like to see. So yeah, so the pros would be stable employment, and you'd find a good paying job, right? The downsides is if you do become an engineer, if you don't like it and you don't want to become a long-term engineer, getting out of that it's not impossible, but it's a hard way out, right? Like they would want you to be an engineer for like 10 years. And then once you're really good at it, then they're like, okay, you're really good at this. Now you can focus on the business side of things, right? This is a trend that I've seen at companies like Intel, at Google, at Facebook, at Amazon, so on, you know? So they kind of keep you, since you're good at your job, you know, like they don't want you to leave your job, which is fair, right? So I would say that would be a con of it. And then I mean, and that depends on how that depends on your viewpoint, right? And then the other con that I would see for engineering is, again, this depends on you as a person, right? You need to determine if you would like to work, if you would like to be kind of like like think of a large company like Amazon. You know, if Amazon or Google or Facebook hires you, or any other company, right? Like Exxon, BP, Shell, or even like Boeing, for example, right? You kind of come in, like these are big companies, think of them as like a giant machine, right? And you come in as kind of like a cog in a big machine, you know? So you're kind of like a small fish in a big pond, you know? Whereas like if you were to work in another field, right? Like say medicine, right? That's not the same situation that you're in, right? So I would say those would be the pros and the cons.
So those were all the questions that I had. Is there anything else you would like to cover that we didn't ask already?
No, I think I was able to, I covered the few things that I wanted to share, right? The one thing that I would highly stress for everyone is try to think 10 years down the road as to like what would be important. For all you know, you like a few of my friends, you could be like a millionaire by the time you're 30 if you join the right company, right? And then in addition to that, I mean, I'm glad that I was able to provide some insight as to like the extracurriculars and the classes that you would need to take.
Thank you so much. All your advice has really helped all of us, I think. And if nobody else has any questions, then I think that's all we have. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending this. And thank you, Karthik, for sharing your experiences and career to all the students. It really helps everyone learn more about your field. And if everyone liked the meeting, then you can share our program to your friends. And if you share it to your friends, you can actually get volunteer hours. So you can get half an hour for each person that you share it to. So yeah, that's all we have. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences to us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, and everyone have a good weekend.
Thank you.